Okay.
Let's talk about infrastructure.
Let's.
Seems to be the big deal. You hear the Biden administration calling for
Button app
let's ramp up
toggle
supply, let's
switch
becoming
to
an energy
does things where I
exporter.
want it to
I believe the United
do.
States
I
running
don't
kind of
necessarily
hit
need a
that
zoom
category in
or
2019. How easy
anything like
is it
that.
to do that?
Let's just
Well,
take
we
out the
have
ad.
decades and decades of low-cost natural gas reserves here in the U.S., and we have all the expertise.
So this here figure 4 on the farm of this tank ground build here, the electric fence and string theory, Ricci tensors, figure 4, you can do spring snare, depending on how you doing maths and fist fight, all in all the time. On the gravity or special relativity and Dirac's equation to some of the Faro costs for bars and being able to play the exclusive mutual combination permutation of the cumulative, I'm sure I messed it up here, slip, trips, and falls, and safety, quality, quantity, honestly, on the farm. Because this math problem about in the tank ground, did the barrel, the hole, what it could do. Again, well, I might have some things running where I'd want to plant a few hedgerows and maybe a few other things inside here to keep an eye on what exactly I'm aiming at here. And again, that's that pipeline work. And again, it does read left to right as Army do. Faro inside here to the right out on the cuts of the pie charts. The string theory, the spring, the manual on D, where are we at here? D 2/1. I'm looking for the backwards D20, D12 manual. Whatever language, the God's butt drop in a wave tank here. Inside that's that model under the figure 4. Gravity is going to be the photon upside down inside of there, based on the alpha particle or beta particle coming first or second, Euler's number, Lagrangian, Ricci, some epsilon into the delta capital form or lower form, and whether that's the lowercase of the golden ratio to Faro, well, in sigma, or excuse me, omega, with the lowercase of golden ratio in hand, right? I mean, if I word it like that, the infrastructure starts to pump out.
The Biden administration and the Trump administration before, as you pointed out.
I think the Democratic Party obviously has its very strong
BAH, stuff that's going to get graphic the actual physics inside the house. Now, when you get to adding the equations together of pumping out those values based on the interior-exterior value that you'll have to get into, or at least partial derivatives of that equation, while dealing with the pie charts, or which part, when you're dealing real parts, not real parts, written into the equation. And I have the day weekly for Faro up there buried into it. We'll talk about food and water and some of the other systems here in the tank ground.
I think it's very interesting.
What's in the pipes? Whoa.
Much focus on this issue, and people start
what's in the pipes there for the energy bunny? The string theory is just we're going to start at the point where the mods and periods, 1/7 or 5 or 8, right? 7 known primes in an octagon, pentagon, MMA for the ER, BUNN over under sigma to changing the fields and how the latticing structure kind of builds into it. I'm allowed a little bit out. It gets a little fuzzy, don't get me wrong. Talk about one diagram to the next here. I mean, how do you want to deal with some of those heavy things that change fields real hard? So we get that bunny trap to be other places, and how we want to design what those actual photoelectric footprint marks look like. Because again, you work your crew too hard. There's one for him, there's one for Aladdin, there's one for just about all of them out there when you're bolting stuff to this kind of system, when the averages over the wave function will be that way regardless. Now, in certain checklists, certain areas, that heavy duty stuff that's kind of overhead on, you hook it into the wall and start telling where the shear forces are based on how I'd have to put a pressure gauge somewhere physically in there, or pull it out from that guy's dipstick right there in that mill floor. Come here, Mufasa. So that'll get out there about that's the real thing, though. Arbiters, the GPT-3 getting in there is gonna do stuff here the same way like the programmer does inside of some of that. You know, what do I want them to do? What do I want the output to be? What's the mosaics inside of here to... We can turn that into a lot of physical things. Here's one. This is your first one, right? You know, you got it done. You figured out the cutout of the footprints of the boots. It's out here. They're Rod and or Ray, X-Ray, right? And you take the spacecraft for a ride. Well, we're talking about 33 1/3, 66.6, and a few other things, really.
Speaking of time, you said
Take up your time, the cost, compressed spring stuff.
What's the timeline?
Short pack your pack with wrenches, right?
I'm not the
Supposed to get there in a hurry.
facility expert. I think the fastest one's ever been built.
670 and 150, the same boot camp, but one's shouldering, one's basic, well, not basic, but economics in general. Like, I need to do financial archaeology in there to figure out who the Matabrachiosaurus is on the mass gap, close to 0, close to 1. Yeah, there's a bit of Daedalus build in the nuclear reactor.
Gang, we need our